The morning started with a golden sunrise over New Horizon. The human colony was alive with the sounds of markets opening, children laughing, and workers preparing for another day. It was peaceful, the kind of day where no one expected anything to go wrong. Farmers moved through the crop fields on the edge of the city. Traders rolled carts of fruit through the streets. The largest building, the colony's central hub, shined under the light of two suns. No one saw the danger coming. It began with a sound, a low hum that made windows tremble. At first, people thought it was a passing cargo hauler. Then the sky darkened. Shadows spread across the ground like black water, swallowing the sunlight. People looked up, panned, their faces froze. The horizon was filled with shapes. Hundreds of massive ships were pushing through the clouds, breaking the calm sky apart. Their hulls were sharp, like knives cutting through the air. The ships were not human. Their surfaces gleamed with alien symbols, glowing in an angry red. For a heartbeat, the colony stood silent. No one moved. Then the first blast came. A beam of blinding energy shot down from the largest ship, striking a block of buildings in the center of the city. In one instant, the street market vanished in a wave of white light and fire. The shock wave knocked people to the ground. Windows shattered. The air turned hot and heavy with smoke. Screams filled the streets. People ran in every direction, some clutching children, others trying to pull loved ones from the rubble. Sirens began to howl. The colony defense towers opened fire, sending streams of glowing blue plasma toward the alien ships. The shots hit, but the alien shields absorbed them like rain hitting glass. More ships descended, their engines roaring like thunder. Alien dropships broke away from the fleet and fell toward the ground, their hulls unfolding to reveal swarms of soldiers. The Threx Dominion had arrived. The Threx were tall, armored in dark bone-like plates that grew from their bodies. Their glowing eyes swept the streets as they marched in. They carried long hooked rifles, and when they fired, the weapons made a sound like tearing metal. Civilians who could not run fast enough were cut down where they stood. Others were dragged screaming into the dropships. From her position near the Western Defense Tower, Captain Merivale could see the whole nightmare unfolding. She had been a soldier once, before she settled on New Horizon to escape war. But war had come to her. "Get those civilians out of the streets," she shouted to the nearest security officers. They were young, barely trained, but they obeyed, helping people toward the underground shelters. A deafening boom shook the ground. One of the alien warships was directly above the central hub, its shadow covering the building completely. The ship opened fire, sending round after round of molten plasma into the colony's command center. The building groaned and collapsed. In a cloud of dust, Mara ducked behind a shattered wall as a blast of heat washed over her. The air was thick with smoke, dust, and the smell of burning metal. She could hear people coughing, crying, and calling out for help. A little girl stumbled past her alone, her face streaked with soot. Mara grabbed her and pulled her into cover. "Where's your family?" she asked. The girl's lips trembled. I don't know. I lost them when the ships came." Mara's jaw tightened. "Stay with me." She looked toward the east side of the colony, where a series of old mining tunnels cut into the rocky hills. If they could get there. Maybe they could hide until the Threx moved on. But the ground shook again. This time, it wasn't from an explosion. It was deeper, heavier, as if something beneath the surface was moving. Mara glanced at the cracked street. She could see dust rising from tiny fissures in the pavement. Somewhere far below there was a sound, faint but sharp, metallic groan. She pushed the thought aside. All right, the priority was getting people to safety. The Threx were spreading through the colony now, their weapons cutting down any resistance. From the rooftops, alien snipers picked off defenders trying to regroup. The defense towers fired one last volley before an alien ship destroyed them with a single blast, and still. The strange rumble under the ground continued. In the heart of the colony, near what used to be the central market, the earth finally split. It happened in seconds. A huge crack opened in the ground, ripping through the street like a black lightning bolt. People on both sides screamed and backed away, but the ground kept breaking, the gap widening until it swallowed entire vehicles. Then, something rose from the darkness. It wasn't an alien soldier. It wasn't human. It was a door. A massive, black slab of metal emerged from the crack, rising higher than the nearby buildings. Red markings glowed faintly on its surface, shapes that looked ancient and wrong. They pulsed, almost like a heartbeat. The Threx soldiers stopped firing. Even they seemed unsure. One of them barked an order, and a group of alien troops approached the slab, weapons ready. They touched its surface, scanning it with strange devices. The air felt heavy, charged, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The red markings grew brighter. Mara, still watching from behind cover, felt the hair on the back of her neck stand on end. She had seen alien tech before, but this wasn't alien. Something about it felt human. Without warning, the slab split down the middle. There was no sound, no grinding of metal, just a smooth, silent opening. Every light in the area went out. The alien ship overhead flickered and went dark. The street lamps died. Even the glow from burning buildings dimmed, as if the fire itself was afraid. For a moment, there was only blackness. Then, from deep inside the opening, a cold wind blew out, carrying with it a smell like wet stone and something metallic, something old. The Threx squad stepped forward into the darkness. Seconds later, the first scream echoed out. It was cut short by a wet, snapping sound. The soldiers outside hesitated, weapons aimed at the doorway. Another scream followed this, one sharper, more desperate than the sound of claws scraping against armor. One Threx soldier stumbled backward into the light, his armor shredded, his eyes wide and unseeing. He was shaking, mumbling words in his own language that even the translator couldn't keep up with. Mara could see blood running down his legs. He looked at his commander and whispered something that made the alien's eyes narrow. Then before he could take another step, something from the dark shot out fast, almost invisible, and dragged him screaming back inside. The black doorway stood open, silent again. The Threx commander barked more orders, but his soldiers were no longer moving. Forward, some stepped back, glancing over their shoulders as if wanting to retreat. The ground shook again. This time, the vibration was sharper, closer, like heavy steps moving beneath the surface. Mara pulled the girl closer to her. The streets were still burning, the sky still filled with enemy ships, but she had the sudden, chilling thought that the real danger had just arrived, and whatever was inside that door wasn't on anyone's side. The colony lay in ruins. Smoke rose in twisting black columns, covering the stars above. Fires burned where buildings had once stood. The air was thick with the smell of charred metal and the cries of the wounded. The alien fleet still hung in the sky, their warships like jagged shadows against the night. Smaller dropships darted through the smoke, delivering more soldiers to the ground. The Threx Dominion was tightening its grip, but none of them knew what they had just awakened near the heart of the city. The massive black slab still stood in the middle of the cracked street. The red markings along its surface pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. The alien soldiers surrounding it kept their distance now. No one wanted to be the next to step inside. Mara Vale was crouched with the little girl behind a collapsed wall 2 streets away. She could see the strange door clearly through the gaps in the rubble. Her instincts screamed at her to get away, but her curiosity kept her watching. Another Threx squad arrived, led by an officer in heavier armor. His helmet was shaped like a skull, and his voice boomed over the street. He ordered 2 squads forward. They hesitated only a moment before obeying. The first soldier crossed the threshold into the black opening. The second followed. Their boots echoed faintly as they disappeared into the dark. The rest waited. The officer stood motionless, staring at the door as if trying to read it. The glow of the markings reflected in his armor. 1 minute passed, then 2. Finally, something moved inside. A single soldier stumbled out, helmet gone, armor ripped open. He was breathing hard, blood running down his face. His eyes were wide with a terror that no battlefield could teach. He collapsed to his knees. His weapon clattered on the ground. "Report," the officer barked. The soldier tried to speak. His voice came out as a broken whisper. "They're awake," he said in the Threk's tongue. The officer frowned. "Who?" The soldier shook his head. "Trembling hunters from the dark." They? A blur shot out from the doorway. It hit the soldier with such force that both vanished back into the black in less than a heartbeat. The only sound was the clatter of the soldiers' dropped rifles spinning on the ground. The officer took a step back. The rest of the squad began to retreat, moving away from the strange opening. Even the Threks, proud and brutal, were afraid now. Mara's heart pounded in her chest. Whatever was inside, it was fast. It was too fast to see. A deep vibration shook the street again. Red markings on the door pulsed faster now, casting a faint glow over the surrounding rubble. From inside came a sound low at first, like a distant growl. It grew louder, sharper, until it became a chorus of clicks and hisses, almost like voices speaking in some forgotten tongue. The little girl clutched Mara's arm. "What is it?" she whispered. Mara didn't answer. She didn't know the officer barked into his cum, calling for reinforcements. More dropships descended, but the door's glow suddenly flared bright, washing the street in crimson light. All at once, every piece of technology within sight shut down. The alien warship overhead flickered and went dark. Dropships stalled in midair and fell like stones, crashing into rooftops and streets. Weapons went silent. Even the Threk's helmets powered off, their visors going black. For a moment, the world was silent, except for the sound coming from inside the door. It was closer now, then something stepped into the light. It was huge, hunched, its body wrapped in thick, dark armor that didn't look like metal or bone, but something older, grown rather than forged. Its head was long and low, with rows of sharp teeth that caught the faint glow. 4 arms hung at its sides, each ending in claws that scraped. The stone as it moved, behind it more shapes moved in the dark. The Threks opened fire, but their rifles were still dead. They scrambled to reload with manual triggers, but it was too late. The creature lunged forward with inhuman speed, cutting through the first soldier before he could scream. The second fell a heartbeat later. The officer roared and charged, drawing a blade. The creature's claws met him in mid-swing, and the two locked in a brutal struggle. The alien fought hard, but the thing from the door was stronger. It lifted the officer off the ground and hurled him into the side of a ruined building. The others broke and ran. Mara pulled the girl closer, her mind racing. This was no ordinary predator. It was something designed for war, something meant to terrify, and it was free now. As the creatures poured out of the black doorway, the ground trembled under their steps. The night air filled with the sound of claws on stone, of growls and hisses. They didn't seem to care about humans or aliens. They only cared about hunting, and they were hungry. The streets of New Horizon had become a hunting ground. Smoke rolled through the alleys, wrapping the ruins in a choking fog. The fires that once burned bright were dim now, choked by the strange power that had killed the colony's machines. The air was heavy with the smell of blood and scorched metal. Somewhere far above, the alien fleet hung motionless, its warships powerless, their lights dead. In the silence came the first scream. It was high, and desperate, cut off halfway through. Then came the sound of something heavy crashing into stone, followed by claws scraping across the street. The Corrin were loose. Mara Vale crouched in the rubble with the little girl pressed against her side. She could see shadows moving through the smoke shapes too fast and too fluid to be human. They darted between broken walls and shattered vehicles, circling. A Threk's patrol appeared from the other end of the street, weapons still dark. They moved, cautiously, glancing over their shoulders. They had been the hunters only an hour ago. Now they looked like prey. One of them stopped, sniffing the air. His eyes widened. The thing hit him from the side. It was a blur black, armored and big enough to crush him to the ground. Claws tore through his chest plate like it was paper. The others opened fire with their manual triggers, but the shots went wide. The creature dropped its prey and vanished into the smoke before they could aim. Again, one of the Threx swore and turned in place, scanning the shadows. A second creature came from above, leapt off a half-collapsed roof, its claws sinking into the soldier's back. The alien screamed once before being pulled up into the darkness. His voice faded into nothing. The remaining soldiers broke formation. They didn't care about orders anymore. They fired wildly at the smoke, then ran. Mara didn't move. She kept her hand over the girl's mouth to stop her breathing from giving them away. Something moved closer. She could hear it now, slow, deliberate. Steps on the cracked pavement. The sound of claws dragging. It's a low growl that rolled through the smoke like distant thunder. A shadow passed just beyond their hiding place. The shape was massive, hunched, its limbs too long for its body. Its head turned slowly. Mara saw the faint gleam of teeth in the dim red light. The creature sniffed the air. Mara froze. She didn't breathe. The little girl's fingers dug into her sleeve. After a long moment, the thing moved on. It slipped back into the smoke without a sound, like it had never been there. Mara's heartbeat slowed just enough for her to think again. She needed to get the girl to the mining tunnels. The Threx in these things would keep each other busy, but not for long. She waited until the street went silent, then pulled the girl with her into a side alley. Elsewhere in the colony, the battle had turned into chaos. The Corin didn't attack in lines or formations. They moved like predators, isolating, ambushing, striking from above and below. They were intelligent, too. Some worked together, driving their prey into traps. Others took their time, stalking a single target until fear broke them. The Threx tried to regroup at the central plaza, but it was hopeless. The predators came at them from every direction, tearing apart defenses in minutes. Bodies lay scattered across the broken streets, alien and human alike. From the top of a half-ruined tower, Mara caught sight of something terrifying. The creatures weren't just killing. They were dragging bodies back toward the black doorway, vanishing into its depths. She didn't know why, but the thought made her stomach turn. The little girl tugged on her arm. "They're not going to stop, are they?" Mara shook her head. No, not until everything's dead." In the distance, she heard the roar of a Corin echo through the ruins. The sound was so loud it made the broken glass in the streets vibrate. Then came more roars. Dozens of them, answering in unison. They were calling to each other, and they were spreading. Mara knew that if the predators reached the spaceport, nothing in orbit would be safe. But for now, survival was the only goal. She tightened her grip on the girl's hand and moved deeper into the ruins, keeping low, every sense tuned for the sound of claws. Somewhere behind them, something was following, and it wasn't a Threx. The night over New Horizon glowed red from fires and the eerie pulse of the black doorway. The colony was no longer a battlefield, it was a graveyard in the making. The Threx Dominion's invasion had turned into a slaughter, but not in the way they had planned. Their soldiers were dead or scattered, their ships crippled. The true killers now moved through the streets like shadows. Captain Mara Vale kept low, leading the little girl through a narrow service tunnel that ran beneath the colony's west sector. The air inside was thick and stale, and the floor shook faintly with each distant explosion, or maybe with the steps of the things hunting. Above, they reached an old maintenance hatch that opened into what used to be a mining hub. The lights here were dim but still functional, powered by an old backup generator deep underground. A handful of survivors were already there, some armed, most just terrified. They stared as Mara entered, their eyes flicking to the suit-covered girl at her side. "Mara." A voice called. She turned to see Yolan Kor, a former engineer she'd known for years. He looked older now, his face pale and streaked with dust. "What happened out there?" he asked. Mara glanced at the others before answering. "It's not just the Threx. Something came out of the ground. They're fast, they're strong, and they don't care who they kill. We need to stay hidden." Yolan swallowed hard. "Saw one. From a distance. They dragged two soldiers into the dark like they weighed nothing. What are they? I don't know, Mara admitted, but she hesitated. They might be human. The room fell silent. She quickly explained the black door, the ancient markings, the way it felt familiar in a way alien tech never did. She didn't know for certain, but something in her gut told her this was a human creation. And if it was, then maybe there was a way to control it. One of the survivors, an older miner named Rafe, shook his head. You're talking about taming. Demons, you can't control something like that. Maybe, Mara said, but if we don't try, we're all dead. And so is every colony in range if these things get off-world. Jalen's eyes lit with cautious interest. The old command. Tunnels under the city, they connect to that vault. I've worked on the systems down there before they were sealed. There's tech in those tunnels, human tech from before the colony was founded. Mara stepped closer. You think there's a control system? He nodded slowly. If those things were built, they were built with a purpose. It means someone had a way to direct them. The risk was insane. Going back toward the vault meant crossing streets crawling with both Threx soldiers and the Predators. But Mara knew it was the only chance they had to turn the tide. She found a rifle leaning against a wall and checked its charge. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. She took extra ammo, a combat knife, and a flare. Yalen, you're with me, she said. The rest of you stay here. If we're not back in 2 hours, seal the hatch and get as deep underground as you can. The little girl grabbed Mara's arm. Don't leave me! Mara crouched down, looking her in the eyes. I have to, but I'll be back, I promise. With Yalen at her side, she slipped out of the hub and back into the darkened streets. The smoke was thicker now, curling in the cold air. They moved. In silence, ducking behind wreckage whenever they heard the scrape of claws. Twice they saw Corrin shapes moving on rooftops, watching, waiting. They reached a half-collapsed subway entrance and descended into the command tunnels. The air grew cooler, and the walls here were different metal, older than the colony itself. Etched with faded symbols, Yalone led the way, his small lamp casting shaky light across the dark corridor. This way. If the control system still exists, it's in the central core. It turned a corner and froze. Ahead, in the faint red glow of emergency lights, a Corrin crouched over a body. The creature's claws were sunk deep into its prey's armor, but it wasn't feeding. It was examining it. Slowly, it turned its head toward them. Mara raised her rifle, but Yalen grabbed her arm. Wait, look. The Corrin didn't attack. It tilted its head, sniffing the air. Then, with a low growl, it stepped back into the shadows and was gone. Mara's pulse hammered in her ears. Why didn't it kill us? Jalen's voice was shaky. Maybe it knows we're human. That thought stuck with her all the way to the central core. They found it behind a blast door so old its seals had rusted. Inside was a control room unlike anything Mara had seen, banks of dark screens. A circular platform in the center, and an old Neuralink chair surrounded by cables. Jalen's voice trembled. This is it. This is how they were commanded. Mara stepped forward, brushing dust from the chair's armrest. It was cold, but not dead. She could feel a faint hum beneath the surface, like a heartbeat waiting to sync with her own. Outside, in the tunnels, the distant sound of claws echoed closer, and Mara had a choice. Run. Or sit in that chair and try to speak to the monsters. She sat. The hum grew stronger. Soft red light spread across the platform. And somewhere far away in the ruins above, a dozen Corrin lifted their heads at once and turned toward her. The neural link came alive around Mara like a living thing. Cold metal touched the back of her neck, and then her mind was no longer her own. Images poured in flashes of movement, sense sharper than sight, the taste of blood on her tongue. She saw the colony through other eyes, eyes that sat low to the ground, that noticed heat more than light, that saw the pulse of life in every living thing. She was inside the Corrin, not one, but many. Each mind was a shard of fury, a predator's instinct sharpened to perfection. But beneath the rage, there were structure patterns, memories of commands long ago. They remembered marching beside humans in wars, No history book spoke. Oof! They remembered killing not for hunger, but for orders. Now, they were waiting. Mara felt their attention turn toward her like a pack staring at a new alpha. It was overwhelming. Her heartbeat matched theirs. She could feel claws flex, muscles coil. Hunt, she thought. Unsure if the link could carry her words, the response was instant, a surge of hunger and movement. Through their eyes, she watched the streets erupt in chaos. Corrin burst from alleys, tearing into Threx soldiers without hesitation. Packs moved in perfect coordination, driving enemies into kill zones, striking from above and below. But something was wrong. Some of the Corrin weren't stopping with the Threx. They were attacking anything that moved. Mara saw one tear through. A human survivor hiding in the rubble, dragging the body back toward the black vault. She tried to push into its mind to stop it, but the predator resisted her. Growling deep in a place beyond sound, Jalen's voice cut through her haze. Mara, you need to disengage before the walls shook. From somewhere above, the deep groan of stressed metal echoed down into the tunnels. A moment later, a new image burned into Mara's mind, a Threx warship lifting off from the colonies. Starport. Dozens of Corrin were already on its hull, tearing into armor plates as it climbed toward the clouds. They were leaving the planet. Mara yanked herself out of the Neuralink, gasping like she'd been drowning. They're getting off-world. Yalin paled. How? The fleet's crippled. They're hitching rides on whatever ships can still move. Mara grabbed her rifle and ran for the exit. If they make it into space, this won't just be our problem. They emerged into the surface chaos. The sky above New Horizon was streaked with the glow of failing engines and falling debris. The Threx fleet was in shambles, half their ships dark. Others firing blindly into the colony below as they tried to escape, but the predators were adapting. One dropship, heavy with retreating Threx, roared into the air only to shudder as something inside tore free. Corrin burst out through the ship's side, dragging a screaming alien into open air before leaping to another vessel mid-flight. The ship spun out of control and exploded over the western ridge. Mara and Yolan sprinted toward the starport, dodging collapsing walls and burning wreckage. They reached the edge of the landing field just as another warship lifted off. Dark shapes clung to its underside like ticks on an animal's skin. One of the shapes dropped to the ground near them, landing in a crouch. It rose slowly, its armor dripping with blood, not its own. Mara raised her rifle, but the Corrin didn't charge. It simply stared at her, tilting its head. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw recognition in its eyes. Then it turned and leaped onto the tail of a departing dropship, vanishing into the smoke above. Jalen's voice was hoarse. Beyond this system, they will, Mara said grimly, unless we stop them now. Eyes lifted to the largest Threx battleship still in orbit, its engines flaring as it prepared to flee. She could feel it through the link. Faint, but their cluster of Corrin deep inside, tearing through decks, heading for the command bridge. If she didn't act, the Predators would soon have a ship big enough to travel anywhere in the galaxy. She clenched her jaw. We're going after them. Yalin blinked. Into space? With what? Mara looked toward a damaged but still functioning Threx gunship, sitting abandoned on the far edge of the landing pad. It was risky, barely intact. It could fly. Come on, she said, already running. We're not letting the monsters inherit the stars. They climbed aboard the hatch ceiling behind them with a screech of metal. The controls were alien, but Mara had flown enough to make sense of them. Engines roared to life, lifting the ship shakily from the ground as they rose above New Horizon. The full scope of the destruction came into view, half the colony gone, the rest burning. And beyond it, in the void, the largest predator hunt in history was about to begin. Night had fallen over Viridian 6, but the darkness was not the same as before. The once silent plains were now filled with whispers, strange movements, and shapes that moved just beyond sight. The air itself felt thicker, heavier, like the planet was holding its breath. The alien invaders. Those who had survived the first wave of horrors had regrouped in a heavily fortified zone near the ruins of the human colony. Their commander, a tall, gray-scaled being named Karzek, had ordered every available weapon pointed outward. Floodlights cut through the shadows. But they only made the blackness beyond seem deeper. Every soldier in Karzek's ranks could feel it. Something was watching them. They had already seen too much teeth glinting in the dark, claws tearing through armored suits, and movement so fast it defied their sensors. Some still whispered about the first contact with these things. They didn't know what they were, but one word kept coming up in hushed, fearful tones. Monsters. Karzek didn't believe in superstition. At least not before tonight. Now he could not shake the image of one of his warriors screaming as something pulled him into the shadows. Screaming, and then nothing. No body. No blood. Just gone. Far away, deeper in the forest that bordered the colony ruins, the creatures moved. They did not speak. They did not rest. They hunted. Their leader, if such a thing could even be called a leader, was larger than the rest, with a scar running down its plated head. It had studied the aliens for hours, learning their patterns, their weaknesses. It knew when they hesitated, when they turned their heads, when they made the mistake of thinking they were safe, and now it was ready to strike. The humans who had survived the initial attack, scattered and hiding in the wasteland, had begun to hear the noises too. Helena Ward, crouched inside the broken remains of a cargo bay, heard the low, rumbling growl echoing in the distance. She had no idea if these monsters were friend or foe, but she did know one thing. The aliens were terrified of them. Somewhere, out there, these creatures were fighting back against the invaders, but not for the humans. No, they hunted for reasons of their own. Back in the alien camp, a sharp, metallic clang broke the tense silence. A soldier had dropped his weapon. Another hissed at him to pick it up. But the sound had already carried into the night. Then came the first scream. It wasn't from the soldier who dropped his weapon. It was from the watchtower above. A shadow had landed on it without a sound, its massive claws gripping the metal frame. One swipe, and the alien lookout fell, disappearing into the black below. Floodlights spun wildly. Blaster fire erupted. The shadows moved faster. The monsters came in from every direction, some crawling along the ground, some leaping from the ruined buildings, others swooping down from the cliffside. Their eyes glowed, faintly, but only for an instant, before they vanished again into the dark. Karzek roared orders, his voice shaking despite himself. "Form ranks, hold the line." But the line was already breaking. Soldiers were dragged screaming into the night. Vehicles overturned as something massive crashed through them. The smell of scorched metal and alien blood filled the air. In the chaos, Helena saw her chance. If these creatures kept attacking, the aliens' defenses would collapse entirely. She could escape, maybe even find other survivors. She pressed herself against the shadows, slipping through the chaos as the camp fell apart around her. The monsters hunted without mercy, but there was no pattern to their slaughter. They seemed to be enjoying it, almost playing with their prey before ending. Then, by the time the night ended, the alien camp was gone. Fires burned where buildings had stood. The ground was littered with shredded armor and twisted weapons. And somewhere out there, in the cold darkness, the monsters retreated into the forest, waiting for the next hunt. Helena knew then. Whatever these things were, they weren't just protecting their world. They were predators. And the aliens had just become their favorite prey. If you want, I can make Part 7 the most intense. High-stakes finale of the series, where both the monsters and humans strike back in a way that will blow your viewers away. The last of the alien fleet burned in the dark, for hours. The wreckage drifted above Nova Vera, glowing faintly as fires consumed what was left of the warships. The silence was strange, too complete, like the whole sky was holding its breath. The people on the ground stood together, watching the debris fall like dying stars. But in the blackness beyond the ruined ships, something moved. It was not alien. It was not human. It's older. The first to notice were the orbital salvage crews. They had gone up to scavenge parts from the wrecks, expecting twisted metal and cold bodies. Instead, they found shapes moving between the shadows of the wreckage shapes that didn't match any life form they knew. When one crew's comes went silent mid-sentence, the others thought it was just debris damage. Then a second crew vanished, then a third. The Human Defense Command sent drones, unreturned. On the surface, Major Arden and the survivors of the 12th Infantry were clearing the last alien positions when they got the order. Do not approach the wrecks. Something else is there. The order made no sense. Arden had fought through burning streets, had seen alien war beasts up close. What could be worse than that? He got his answer when a fragment of alien hull crashed into a nearby ridge. Was not alien tech, not bodies, but strange, and jagged tunnels carved straight through the metal as if something had eaten its way out. The walls were slick with a black tar-like fluid that pulsed faintly in the light. One of his soldiers, Corporal Yates, touched the fluid. His fingers came away smoking. "It's alive," he whispered. They left the wreck untouched, but that night, people started disappearing from the outskirts of the settlement. No screams, no signs of struggle, just empty beds and doors left. Ajar by the third night, security cameras caught the first clear image. A tall, skeletal figure, its skin like obsidian glass, moving impossibly fast. It stepped out of the shadows, paused to look directly into the lens, and then the feed went black. Arden knew then that this wasn't random. The aliens had brought something with them, something they had tried to control, something that had broken free when their fleet fell, and now, whatever it was hunting in the ruins of Nova Ver. It was not here for food, it was not here for territory, it was here for them, the survivors who had fought hardest, the humans who had pushed back, because in the cold space between the stars, a truth older than war whispered, "Monsters know their own." Arden loaded his rifle and looked at his soldiers. "We ended the aliens," he said. "We deal with the real threat." Far above, in the drifting graveyard of ships, the shadows stirred again, and something smiled.